Welcome to the first ever episode of How My D&D Party Got Blowed Up. It's Ooze time, baby. I barely get to talk about oozes on this channel because when I am choosing which monsters to talk about, I always try to pick something that is either unique in concept, meaning it offers something different to the game which doesn't already exist, or has a really interesting history behind it that I think is worth talking about, ideally both. And unfortunately for the ooze enthusiasts out there, most oozes don't fall into either of those categories. I mean, sure, once in a while I'll stumble across something like the Genius Loci, a monster whose name I will never know how to pronounce correctly, but for the most part, oozes are just like, it's a black pudding, but it does fire damage, or it's a gray ooze, but it does cold damage, which might have its niche at the game table, but you don't really need a whole video to explain why a monster like that is interesting or how it could be useful. But today's monster, the gunpowder ooze, might not be the most out there concept you've ever heard of, but it's a lot of fun, and there are a few things about it that really surprised me, so we're gonna dive in and give this explosive slime its due. Because if there's one way to ensure I'll at least look at a monster entry, it's to have artwork with a cool explosion in it. The Gunpowder Ooze first saw the light of day in the Pathfinder adventure, Wardens of the Reborn Forge, but it would get reprinted for Pathfinder 2e in Impossible Lands. So obviously someone over at Paizo shares my affinity for making things go boom. The Gunpowder Ooze itself is a creature that, unsurprisingly, few people truly understand. It's expected that they form when some ooze of a variety such as a gray ooze or black pudding comes into contact with a large amount of gunpowder, absorbs it into their form, and that all makes sense. But others believe they are created when arcane forces come into contact with large amounts of gunpowder, such as through a wild magic surge in an arcane forge, or even on the battlefield. Anyone running a campaign in Eberron, I'm sure, is practically salivating at the thought of living spells coming into contact with a store of black powder and spawning an army of these things, but stick with me, because we're gonna get to that and so much more. Dubious origins aside, the Gunpowder Ooze is a serious threat in combat, which is only one of the reasons why I really wanted to talk about them. There aren't too many high-level oozes out there, and the Gunpowder Ooze is a CR 13 monster, which puts them in the sweet spot of huge threat for lower and mid-level parties and viable mook for the higher-level parties out there. They also have a bunch of really fun combat tricks and ways to explode for potential chain reactions that will make your players think thrice before ever lighting a torch in a dark cave again. But before we get into all that, I want to take a moment to give a shout out to this week's sponsor, the Tabletop Table, and show you one of the coolest TTRPG products on the market. Has this ever happened to you? I sure do love playing tabletop games, but I wish I had more table for my table. Well, with the Tabletop Table, we put more table on top of your table. Top that. The Tabletop Table is a fully portable gaming table that is designed to give you both an amazing surface to game on away from home and an enhanced surface for your gaming space in your house. They actually sent me one of these bad boys so I could get some hands-on experience, and I gotta say, I love this thing. I'm fortunate enough to have a pretty good sized dining room table to game on. However, setting up the Tabletop Table on top of my table was way more awesome than I expected it to be. Having the elevated surface for the game board was really handy, and it freed up a ton of space underneath the tabletop, which was sick. Also, as someone who uses a lot of terrain on game night, being able to use this as an elevated build platform for my dungeons that I can grab from the other room and just set up the table however I want and bring it in is really awesome. The edges are also magnetized with magnets forged by Hephaestus or something, because they're incredibly strong. Like, the table comes with these little platforms for holding game pieces and cards that snap onto the side, right? But after a close call with someone who shall not be named almost spilling my tea, I set it down on a spare platform and that thing was rock solid. The table, in fact, is rock solid. It does not tip at all. You can lean on it, and I am honestly super impressed by this thing just overall. It's really sturdy, and the table that they sent me specifically was one of their relic tables, which are made from walnut, so they clock like 21 pounds, but they're incredibly high quality builds. But if you're looking for something lighter and more cost effective, they also have the Hexlite model, which is exactly the same configuration, but it's only 7 pounds, making it much easier to travel with, especially if you're intent on taking it to conventions or something. Personally, I do a ton of camping over the summer, and I'm so stoked to take this thing with me so my friends and I don't accidentally send game pieces flying everywhere into the woods when someone needs to leave the tent to stave off the ghosts and ghouls who haunt the area that I camp in. It's like Blair Witch out there. So whether you want something mobile, something to enhance your existing space, or something to turn your coffee table into a proper gaming area, the tabletop table is the thing you're after. They've even got extenders if you're into the Eurogame lifestyle, which, hey man, I don't judge, you get those victory points, brother. The project is currently live on Kickstarter with special pricing for backers, and you can find it by clicking the link in the description down below. You seriously don't want to miss this one. Take a look for yourself and thank me later. I know personally I'll be picking up another one of these bad boys and some extenders. And thank you so much, Tabletop Tables, for the cool table and for sponsoring this video about pudding that explodes. Speaking of, let's get back to it, shall we? Use so many explosion effects in this video. The Gunpowder Ooze is no joke at a whopping CR of 13. Like all oozes, they're kinda slow, have terrible armor class, and not much in the way of brain power. But unlike most oozes, this one's got a gun. Well, it is a gun. Sort of. It can make a ranged attack that is more or less just the ooze using the gunpowder of which it is made to fire off a shot at a target within 300 feet for a bunch of piercing damage. It can of course also make pseudopod attacks as well that not only grapple the target if they hit, but also have a chance to coat them in a sticky gunpowder-like residue that coats the target and hangs around for 24 hours or until it's deliberately washed away with soap and water, a process that takes an hour. Now, making the target smell like sulfur and forcing them to fail that weird little wand test that TSA does on your laptop when you go through airport security is not the only thing this residue does. It's an airport joke. If a target coated in the residue uses a firearm, wields a weapon that does fire damage, or they take fire damage while they are coated in this residue, they explode, taking 5d6 fire damage and dealing half of that amount of damage to other creatures within 5 feet of themselves. What's especially fun about that is that our ooze is vulnerable to fire damage. So if things start popping off, it's gonna take a good chunk of damage itself, which might seem bad for the ooze, but it's honestly worse for everyone around it. Because like many other oozes, this one can indeed split into 2 separate creatures when it takes slashing damage. However, it also splits when it takes fire damage, and it explodes for 10d6 damage in a cone that is pointed at the source of the fire damage it took, or just in a 20-foot circle around it if there's no obvious direction the damage came from, such as in the case of a fireball or something like that. So if it's got someone grappled and that person takes fire damage, they'll explode, and then cause the ooze to explode, which in turn causes even more damage to the original explodee. Long story short, you don't want to introduce fire to the situation unless these oozes are very, 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 very far away from you. They of course do have a little explosive blast attack they can do against a single target, which is on a recharge of 5 to 6, so they don't get it off every round, but it's always a possibility this thing might blow up on its own. To be completely honest, in terms of raw damage output, these oozes are straight up terrifying, and if any adventuring party is not careful around them, they will quickly discover the meaning of shock and awe. But as is the case with most oozes and slimes, the most interesting stuff about this creature is how they interact with the world around them and the implications of their mere existence to begin with. So let's move on and talk about how you might actually use one of these creatures at the game table by exploding them. As mentioned, there are all sorts of ways a gunpowder ooze might find itself manifesting in a long-forgotten dungeon, or even in the center of industry. Perhaps an ancient store of gunpowder in a dwarven ruin, or naturally occurring saltpeter deposit in a lonely cave was subject to some kind of magical surge, or merely a visit from a black pudding. Whatever the case, having a gunpowder ooze appear as a dungeon encounter is something very fun and unexpected that also tells us a little bit about the area the players are exploring. We love environmental storytelling. Perhaps the ooze was no mere happenstance, but rather it was created on purpose, by design. See, in D&D, all oozes inevitably, one way or another, lead back to Dweeblex, the demon lord of slimes. So perhaps the gunpowder oozes were first created by a cult of Dweeblex in order to wage war against an enemy who used gunpowder against them, turning their stores hostile. Or maybe they have simply begun to rise from the battlefield of ancient conflicts where gunpowder and magic were used to wage war, and the two volatile elements have coalesced into a slime with a desert eagle. It's also possible that perhaps in a gunpowder refinement facility, probably owned and operated by dwarves, a gunpowder ooze has become manifest and is running rampant, creating more of its kind and detonating countless powder kegs along the way. Maybe this is how the Dwarven Ruin became a ruin in the first place. Or maybe they were created on purpose by a military organization who sought to weaponize them as weapons. If controlled, a gunpowder ooze could make for a brilliant tool on the battlefield. At least, until they go rogue and start attacking your own soldiers, it's a whole thing. Don't worry about that. I also love the idea of a pirate ship that instead of cannons, simply has a bunch of gunpowder oozes locked and loaded on deck. Perhaps the captain of the ship is some kind of sentient ooze like a plasmoid, or maybe the ship is even being controlled by an oblex that's crewing the entire ship itself. If you don't want to introduce gunpowder weapons into your world, an ooze that is infused with the properties of gunpowder is kind of a fun way to have cannons without really having cannons. Or perhaps in your world, gunpowder oozes are actually the natural form of gunpowder, and the precious explosive material must be extracted from them rather than mined and prepared in a refinery. I also like the idea of gunpowder oozes going on a rampage and getting combined with some other alchemical concoctions of vague description. This could be a really interesting way to enhance your oozes further, adding new abilities that make the explosions all the more dangerous. We love an ooze that explodes and also creates mustard gas. Why not? But however you choose to use this ooze, I think they are special little slimy guys, and I look forward to hearing about what they get up to in your various campaigns. As always, if you want to use this monster in your game, linked in the description down below, you will find a stat block which contains all the information you will need to successfully run this monster at your game table. And of course, if you're one of my lovely patrons over on the Patreon page, you will find a high-res PDF stat block. It's all the same information, it's just a fancier layout, looks cool, helps support me. You know the deal. Speaking of which, thank you so much to this week's randomly selected Patron of the Week. I want to give a massive shout out this week to Omar Jones. Thank you so much for your support, my friend. It means the most. Couldn't do it without you and the other patrons out there, and thank you for watching. As always, if there's a monster from an older edition of D&D, Pathfinder, another role-playing game, or whatever, let me know in the comments down below, or in the Dungeon Dad Discord channel, or the Creature Suggestions channel in the Dungeon Dad Discord. Say that 5 times fast. And you may just see it show up on a future episode of Monster of the Week. I talked about this in my last video, but I'm talking about it again. You can't stop me. It's my channel, and I do what I want. But seriously, keep watching, please. I need you to keep watching. Oh my God. Next month, I am gonna be at Gamescom Canada running some games. I've got a couple seats left at my table, so if you wanna play D&D with me, I will be there running a really cool adventure inspired by a little zine called The Vast in the Dark, which was made by Charlie Ferguson Avery. It's a really cool product. Run a bunch of games in that setting. It's super fun. You should check that out if you haven't already. That's not even a sponsor. That's just a recommendation. Charlie makes awesome stuff. But if you do want to play in one of Charlie's worlds with me at Gamescom Canada and you're going to be there, I will leave a link to the event I'm running there in the description down below. And if you can't make it for that, but you're going to be at Gamescom Canada regardless, and you see me, come say hi. I'd love to meet you. Tell me about your favorite monster, and let's chat. But ultimately, that is all I got for you this week. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then.